Welcome, dear readers, to a journey through time, where the weight of aristocratic traditions meets the silent strength of an unlikely heart. This is a story about impossible choices, about a love born not from the first glance, but from a patient vigil. It's about a woman who dared to occupy a place never meant for her, and a man who needed to awaken twice, once from a coma, and again to the truth of his heart. Imagine waking from a deep sleep to discover you are married. That during 7 months of unconsciousness, a stranger became your wife, inherited your name, inhabited your rooms. And that this stranger, a bourgeois confectioner responsible for the poison that nearly killed you, cared for you as if you had been lifelong lovers. This is the story of Sebastian Ashford, an English viscount of the Victorian era, and Eleanor Hartwell, the woman who saved him at the cost of her own freedom. A story where love had to learn to exist before it could be felt, where devotion preceded desire, and where two hearts separated by social chasms found in the silence of a sick room, the language no aristocratic ballroom could ever teach. Before we dive into this narrative, dear viewer, tell us, where are you watching from today? From what corner of the world does your soul connect with this story from another time? And if this journey touches your heart, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave a like. Every gesture encourages us to continue bringing you stories that cross centuries to reach you. Year 1838. Springburn location, Somerset County, Victorian England. The March rain beat against the window panes of Hartwell & Sons confectionery like the impatient fingers of a creditor at the door. Inside, amidst the aroma of vanilla and the warmth of the ovens, Eleanor Hartwell worked with the precision of someone embroidering invisible lace. Her hands, small, calloused, yet surprisingly delicate when handling the royal icing, molded sugar roses that seemed plucked from impossible gardens. She was 24 with a face that painters might call plain, were it not for her gaze. Deep brown eyes that carried the premature gravity of one who learned early that beauty is a privilege and work is destiny. Her brown hair, always pinned in a severe bun, escaped in rebellious strands that she impatiently blew away as she concentrated. Today, her hands trembled imperceptibly. 400 elaborate pastries, 15 different types of cream, spices from the Indies that cost the equivalent of 3 months' profit, Belgian chocolate that her father had negotiated as if they were bars of gold, refined sugar that sparkled like impossible snow under the English sun. All of this for the annual ball at Ashford Manor, where the aristocracy of Somerset would gather to dance, conspire and judge, where duchesses would wear gowns that cost more than the entire confectionery, where the Hartwell name would be spoken, not with bourgeois disdain, but with respect, or so Eleanor's father dreamed. Mr. Hartwell, a man with a stooped back and flour-stained hands, had staked everything on this order. Not just the money borrowed at suffocating interest rates, but the reputation built over 40 years, brick by brick, cake by cake. Eleanor looked out the fogged window. Outside, Bath stretched across its Georgian hills, a spa town where ancient Romans had sought healing, and where now the Victorian elite sought status. The confectionery occupied a modest but dignified corner on a respectable commercial street. It was no palace, but it was theirs. The bell on the door chimed. A drenched messenger entered, a sealed letter in his hand. The Ashford seal, a golden anchor on red wax. Eleanor's father tore open the envelope with fingers that tried not to shake. He read it once, twice. The color drained from his face like dough without yeast. Eleanor already knew even before he spoke. She recognized that look. It was the look of a man who sees the ground open up beneath his feet. That night, 120 guests at the ball fell ill. Not with a passing discomfort, but with violent convulsions, fevers that burned away reason and retching that turned the stomach inside out. Among them were 3 duchesses, 2 viscounts, a member of Parliament, and, most serious of all, the sole heir of the Ashford family. Lord Sebastian Ashford, 29 years old, the future viscount, collapsed in the middle of the ballroom. It was said later that he tried to reach the door, but his legs gave way as if made of mist. He hit his head violently on the marble floor. The sound, witnesses recounted, was like something breaking forever. At the Hartwell confectionery, the family did not sleep. Eleanor remained seated at the kitchen table, still smelling of vanilla and disaster, while her father read and reread the letters that arrived. Accusations, threats, lawsuits, 143 civil suits, £15,000 in debt, a fortune they could never repay, not in 3 generations. Her father would face prison in 3 weeks, according to the Unforgiving Debtors Act. But the worst part wasn't the money. It was the look in her mother's eyes as she fell ill from grief. It was her younger brother, only 16, having to abandon his studies. It was the 22 employees left jobless when the health authorities nailed boards over the confectionery door, as if sealing a coffin. And it was Eleanor, waking each morning knowing that the creams, her creams, the ones she had prepared with such dedication, had been the poison. An invisible bacterial contamination, born of improper storage on a night that was too warm. An imperceptible mistake, a devastating consequence. The weight was not just on her shoulders, it was inside her chest, compressing her lungs, stealing her breath. And so, under the persistent March rain of 1838, while Somerset slept its aristocratic and merciless sleep, Eleanor Hartwell learned that there are things worse than poverty. There is guilt that cannot be repaid, and there is a future that closes like a door slammed by the wind, leaving not a single crack of light. 8 months passed like an exile within her own home. The Hartwell family had moved to a smaller house in a less favourable suburb of Bath. The walls were thinner. Eleanor could hear the neighbours arguing about coal and potatoes. The non-existent garden was replaced by a tiny courtyard, where her mother tried unsuccessfully to grow herbs. The house smelled of mildew and resignation. Eleanor now worked as a seamstress, embroidering trousseaux for brides she would never meet. Her fingers, once so skilled with icing, now bled from piercing thick fabric. Each stitch was a silent penance. Her mother was wasting away in the back room. The doctor, who charged far too much for his visits, murmured about nervous melancholy and prescribed rest that no one could afford. Her father left before dawn, searching for work that no one offered a man tainted by scandal. Her brother had disappeared to the docks, hauling crates for pennies. And over it all, like a cloud that would not dissipate, hung the news that the newspapers repeated with morbid interest. Lord Sebastian Ashford remained in a state of deep unconsciousness. Brain fever, they said. Possible encephalitis secondary to the poisoning. The most renowned doctors from London had been consulted. The diagnosis was grim, vegetative, prognosis uncertain. Eleanor read these reports with trembling hands. Every word was a personal indictment. That man, whom she had never seen, never known, lay unconscious because of her. It was on a November afternoon, when the London fog reached all the way to Bath, turning the world into a ghost of itself, that the carriage stopped in front of the Hartwells' modest house. It was no ordinary carriage. It was a vehicle lacquered in gleaming black, pulled by horses with coats that looked as if they had been groomed by angels. The crest on the door, a golden anchor entwined with roses, was recognizable even to someone who had never set foot in Ashford Manor. The bell rang. Eleanor, who was embroidering by the window, felt her heart race. She opened the door. Lady Victoria Ashford stood there. The Dowager Viscountess was 58 years old and had a presence that could fill spaces much larger than her stature. She was not tall, but she carried herself as if she were. Her mourning dress, absolute black without a single adornment, was made of fabric so fine it probably cost more than all the furniture in the Hartwell house combined. Her face, marked by dignified wrinkles, possessed a beauty that age had not diminished, only transformed into something more severe. Grey eyes that seemed to read not just faces but souls. She entered without asking permission. She assessed the modest interior with a single glance, then fixed her gaze on Eleanor. Miss Eleanor Hartwell. It was not a question. It was an identification. Eleanor gave an inadequate curtsy. She had never been taught how to bow to a viscountess. Lady Ashford, this unworthy home. Spare me the bourgeois pleasantries, child. The voice was cold but not cruel, merely direct like a surgical scalpel. I have come to propose a business matter. Where can we speak without interruption? She led Lady Victoria to what they called the parlour, a tiny room with shabby furniture. She offered tea they didn't have. The Viscountess refused with a wave of her hand that seemed to dismiss a fly. She sat in the least worn armchair, her back perfectly straight. Eleanor remained standing, hands clasped in front of her, awaiting the sentence that was surely coming. My son, Lady Victoria began, has lain unconscious for 7 months. The doctors oscillate between useless hope and brutal honesty. He could awaken tomorrow. He may never awaken. His body lives, but his mind, it is in a place we cannot reach. Eleanor lowered her eyes, feeling the familiar weight of guilt tighten its grip. However, the Viscountess continued, matters of inheritance do not wait for medical convenience. Sebastian turns 30 in 4 months. According to my late husband's will, a specific irrevocable clause, Sebastian must be married by the age of 30 to inherit the title and properties. She paused significantly. Otherwise everything passes to a distant cousin, a man who would sell Ashford Manor to speculators, evict 300 tenants and destroy a 3-century legacy. Do you comprehend the gravity? Eleanor understood, but she didn't understand why she was the one hearing this. Lady Victoria stood up. She walked to the window, observing the fog that turned Bath into a faded watercolor. "I propose an alliance, Miss Hartwell. A legal marriage between you and my son." The world seemed to tilt. Eleanor clung to the back of the chair. "Forgive me, my lady, but your son is unconscious. How? A legal proxy, a perfectly valid legal artifice. I obtained a special dispensation from the bishopric, who was reluctant, I admit, but money and influence can persuade even ecclesiastical consciences. The ceremony will be private yet legitimate. He will awaken married, or he will never awaken, but he will die married, preserving the inheritance." Eleanor felt nausea rise within her. "My lady, with all due respect, I am responsible for his condition. My family caused this tragedy. How can you propose precisely because of that?" Lady Victoria turned, her eyes sharp. "Your family owes mine an impossible redemption. My son requires a wife to save his legacy. The equation is perfect." She approached, each step measured. "Listen to the terms, child. If you accept, I will withdraw all charges against your family. All of them. I will pay the £15,000 of debt. The confectionery will reopen with its reputation restored. Your mother will receive proper medical treatment. Your brother will return to his studies. Furthermore, you will receive £20,000 as a dowry, enough to live comfortably even if everything else should crumble." She stepped back, allowing Eleanor to breathe. "If Sebastian awakens and desires an annulment, which is likely, let us admit, you will receive a lifetime residence and £500 annually. If he passes away, you will remain an aristocratic widow with minor properties. If by some unlikely miracle he accepts you as his true wife, an almost imperceptible hesitation, so you will be the Viscountess of Ashford." Eleanor felt her legs give way. She sat down without asking permission. "Why me?" Her voice came out raspy. "Hundreds of aristocratic young women would accept. Because hundreds of aristocratic young women would demand love, attention, a real marital life. You, child, will be a wife on paper. You will only need to exist legally. And because," the grey eyes softened imperceptibly, "you carry a guilt that will make you dedicated. You will care for him as penance. That is enough for me." Silence filled the room like rising water. "You have 3 days to decide," said Lady Victoria, walking to the door. "After that, your father will be arrested. Your mother will waste away. Your brother will be lost to the docks. And Sebastian will lose everything that generations have built." She paused at the threshold without turning back. "One last piece of information, Miss Hartwell. My son is a good man. Before the accident, he dedicated his personal fortune to working children. He designed schools, fought injustices, challenged cruel aristocrats. I am not asking you to sacrifice yourself for a monster. I'm asking you to save a man who, if he were conscious, would probably forgive your family without demanding a price." And she left, leaving behind only the scent of expensive lavender and impossible choices. Eleanor remained seated until nightfall, when her father returned with empty hands and dead hope in his eyes. She hugged him, feeling him tremble. And she understood, in that desperate embrace, that some choices are not choices at all. They are merely different ways of falling. The Chantilly lace dress had belonged to Eleanor's great-grandmother. It was the only heirloom they hadn't pawned, stored at the bottom of an old trunk smelling of lavender and memories of better times. The lace had yellowed slightly, but in the dim light of dawn it looked like ancient ivory. Eleanor looked at herself in the room's fogged mirror. She didn't recognize herself. Or perhaps she recognized herself all too well. The woman she had always been but had never admitted. The one capable of carrying burdens that should break shoulders. The one who chose sacrifice over her own salvation. "You look beautiful, my daughter." Her mother, still pale but awakened by the occasion, adjusted the veil. Her fingers trembled. "Forgive us. Forgive your father. Forgive me, forgive mother." Eleanor took her hands. There is no forgiveness needed when there is love, but there was. They both knew it. The air was heavy with it. The Ashford carriage arrived before the full light of dawn, while Bath still slept under a blanket of mist. Eleanor entered with her family. Her father wore a suit that had been fashionable 20 years earlier. Her brother, his hair tamed with water, stared out the window as if memorizing the city before it vanished forever. Ashford Manor emerged from the fog like a ghost ship reaching port. Eleanor had seen drawings in books, but drawings could not capture its magnitude. 80 windows reflecting the sunrise, gardens that stretched as far as the eye could see, glass conservatories where impossible plants bloomed under protection, towers that touched the English sky like the fingers of a sleeping giant. The private chapel was at the rear, an ancient Norman structure with stained glass windows that transformed light into colored theology. Inside, the silence had a different texture. It was not the absence of sound, but the presence of centuries. There were few people. Lady Victoria, severe in black. The vicar, uncomfortable in his ceremonial vestments. A lawyer holding a stack of documents. 2 legal witnesses. The Hartwell family. And a nurse, seated next to a figure reclining in a special chair. Sebastian Ashford. Eleanor stopped at the threshold, seeing him for the first time. They said he was handsome before the accident. Now he lay unconscious, and that beauty had transformed into something more disturbing. Absolute stillness. His face had an aristocratic structure, pronounced bones, a defined jawline. Dark hair fell across a pale forehead. He was dressed formally, a wedding suit, a perfectly tied cravat, as if he were a conscious groom awaiting his beloved. But his eyes remained closed. His hands crossed over his lap did not move. His chest rose and fell with breath so shallow it seemed an effort. Eleanor walked down the central aisle, each step echoing. She could feel all the eyes on her. Judgment, pity, morbid curiosity. She positioned herself beside him. The proximity revealed details the distance had hidden. A small scar on his temple, where his head had struck. A pallor that came from months without sun. A thinness that the suit tried to conceal. The vicar began the ceremony with a reluctant voice. Familiar words, but distorted by the impossible situation. Dearly beloved, no one there was beloved. Everyone was necessary. Sebastian Ashford, do you take Eleanor Hartwell to be your lawfully wedded wife? The lawyer stood, his voice formal. He accepts by legal proxy, according to the documents filed at the Somerset Registry, certified by the Bishopric of Bath, and recognized by the Crown. An awkward silence. Eleanor Hartwell, do you take Sebastian Ashford to be your lawfully wedded husband? Eleanor looked at him. The unconscious man who would become her husband. The man she had unknowingly poisoned. The man whose future was now tied to hers by ropes of necessity and despair. I do. Her voice came out firmer than she expected. Rings were exchanged. His placed by the nurse on a finger that neither resisted nor consented. Hers far too heavy. A Colombian emerald that had belonged to the Ashfords since 1720. You may kiss the bride. The moment everyone had dreaded. Eleanor took a deep breath. She leaned in. The veil fell forward, creating a curtain between them and the world. She brought her lips to his. They were cold. Not completely. There was still life there, a persistent circulation. But cold like lips that do not choose, do not respond, do not know they are being kissed. Eleanor touched them gently, more a promise than a kiss. And then, his fingers twitched, just a little, just enough for Eleanor to feel it. No one else saw. Everyone was uncomfortably staring at their own shoes. But she felt it, as if something in the abyss of unconsciousness had recognized, for a fraction of a second, that it was no longer alone. The nurse, consulting a pocket watch, noted in a notebook, involuntary spasm at 6:47 a.m., no medical significance. But Eleanor pulled back with a racing heart. She touched her own lips, still feeling the inexplicable electric shock, as if two souls had recognized each other before their bodies, before their minds, before anything made sense. I now pronounce you husband and wife, said the vicar, closing the book too quickly. May God have mercy. He didn't say on your souls, but everyone understood. Signatures were affixed. Certificates were stamped. The lawyer distributed copies as if handing down a sentence. Eleanor signed Eleanor Ashford for the first time, her handwriting trembling. Outside, the sun had finally broken through the mist. Bath was waking up to another day. And Eleanor Hartwell, now Lady Eleanor Ashford, future Viscountess of Ashford Manor, looked back one last time before entering the carriage that would take her to her new life. She saw her family waving, saw her mother's tears, saw her father straighten his shoulders, finally relieved of a weight that had nearly broken him. And she saw in the chapel window Sebastian being carried back to the manor in a wheelchair, his head lolled to one side, his body inert. Her husband, the man she had saved at the cost of her own freedom, the man who might never know he had a wife. The carriage departed, the wheels on the gravel sounding like a sentence without appeal. And Eleanor, alone on the overly plush seat, allowed herself to cry for the first time in 8 months. Not from sadness, not from fear, but from something more complex. Relief mixed with terror, sacrifice mixed with a strange purpose. As if, in some twisted and impossible way, she was exactly where she was meant to be. Ashford Manor revealed itself gradually, like a book whose reading required time and attention. Eleanor woke each morning in a room that could contain the Hartwells' entire house. The curtains were heavy velvet that blocked all light. The walls were covered with French wallpaper, depicting pastoral scenes. The bed, so large that Eleanor got lost in it, had a canopy with lace that looked like trapped clouds. But luxury did not bring comfort. It only brought a sharp awareness of her own inadequacy. The servants treated her with a chilly courtesy. They smiled when necessary. They bowed when she passed. But in their eyes was a silent judgment. The merchant's daughter who had become a lady, the scandalous marriage, the intruder in the natural order of things. Mrs. Beatrice Thornton, the housekeeper, was particularly ruthless in her venomous kindness. Lady Ashford, perhaps you would wish to learn the proper protocol for receiving aristocratic visitors. One can easily confuse the cutlery during a formal dinner. It would be embarrassing. Eleanor swallowed the humiliation with the same discipline with which she had swallowed years of hard work. She smiled, thanked her, and learned. She memorized which fork was for oysters, which glass for port wine, how to fold a napkin in 12 different ways depending on the occasion. But at night, when no one saw, she cried with rage. Not sadness, rage, against a world that valued how one held a glass more than the content of one's character. It was Lady Victoria who, 3 days after the wedding, handed her a key, Sebastian's rooms. Explore them. Get to know the man you may never know while he is awake. The key felt heavier than it should. Eleanor waited until late when the corridors emptied. She walked through the west wing where Sebastian's apartments were located. The carved oak door opened with a creak that sounded like a secret being revealed. She stepped inside. The scent came first. The leather of books, cold pipe tobacco, something of sandalwood and pine. A masculine scent, but not oppressive. Organized yet lived in. The windows offered a view of the gardens. Eleanor walked slowly, touching surfaces as if touching tangible memories. An immense bookshelf covered an entire wall. Titles in Latin, Greek, English, French, Italian. Vitruvius's De Architectura. A translation with notes in the margins. The construction of rural schools. A technical manual with detailed illustrations. The poetry of Byron, its pages worn from rereading. Rousseau's Confessions, with passages underlined. Man is born free and everywhere he is in chains. A drafting table dominated the center of the room. Eleanor approached reverently. Architectural plans were spread out, some finished, others mere sketches, but they all shared something. They were not mansions, not aristocratic estates. They were practical, functional buildings, beautiful in their simplicity. One project stood out, the title at the top in a firm hand, School for Working Children, Ashford Estate. Eleanor unfolded the large drawings. Her heart ached. Classrooms illuminated by wide windows, a children's library with low shelves, a refectory where poor children could eat a hot meal at least once a day, a garden with space to play, a radical concept allowing children to be children. In the margins, notes in black ink, no child should work before the age of 12. Education is a right, not a privilege of birth. If I cannot change the whole world, I can change this corner of it. Eleanor sat in his chair, touching the drawings as if touching materialized devotion. This man, who lay unconscious in a nearby room, dreamed of futures that the aristocracy considered dangerous. She opened a side drawer. She found leather-bound diaries, the years marked on the spines. She knew she shouldn't read them. Privacy was sacred, even in a forced marriage. But the need to know him overcame her scruples. She chose the diary from 1837, the year before the accident. She opened to a random page. Visited a coal mine in Manchester today. Saw 7-year-old children working 16-hour shifts in the tunnels. Their small bodies are convenient for tight spaces. Some have never known sunlight. Others contract lung diseases that kill them slowly. I was told this is necessary for industrial progress. I ask, progress for whom? I returned to Ashford ashamed of every silver spoon, every silk curtain. I was born into unearned privilege. The only redemption is to use this position to lift others. Eleanor read page after page, illuminated only by a flickering candle. She discovered a man who visited orphanages anonymously, donating fortunes, who argued with other aristocrats about the treatment of tenants, who had written a furious letter to the Times of London, defending universal suffrage, a letter Lady Victoria had prevented him from sending because it would tarnish the family's reputation. She found correspondence with the director of an orphanage. My dear Mrs. Patterson, enclosed is a cheque for £2,000 for St. Mary's Orphanage. I insist that you do not reveal its origin. I seek no recognition. If God exists, he knows. If he does not, I have done the right thing regardless of heavenly witnesses. Sincerely, an anonymous friend. Below, in a different hand, a note from the director, Lord Sebastian Ashford. He doesn't know we recognize the letterhead. Eleanor also discovered fragments of personal pain. Mentions of a lost love, a broken heart, a profound loneliness despite his wealth. but the name was never revealed. Only I, a mysterious initial that appeared and disappeared like a ghost among the pages. I married today a man she does not love. I read the announcement in the paper. I felt as if a part of me died, but she did what the aristocracy always does. Obeyed her father, her duty, her convenience. I will never blame her. I will only forever love a woman I cannot have. Dawn broke with Eleanor still reading, her eyes red not from lack of sleep, but from emotion. She knew Sebastian now, not the unconscious body she would visit in a few hours, but the soul generous, wounded, idealistic, profoundly good. She closed the last diary with reverence. She blew out the candle, and when she left his rooms, walking back to her own, she wore an expression that Mrs. Thornton observed with curiosity. It was no longer the expression of an embarrassed intruder. It was the expression of a woman with a purpose. The visits began as an obligation and transformed into a sacred ritual. Every morning at 10 o'clock sharp, Eleanor entered Sebastian's room. The nurse, Miss Roberts, an efficient middle-aged woman, would discreetly leave, allowing them to be alone. The room smelled of medicine and lavender. Open windows let in a breeze that moved the curtains like dancing ghosts. Sebastian remained reclined in an adjustable bed, his head propped on pillows that Eleanor insisted on adjusting personally. Initially, she didn't know what to do. She would sit in the chair beside him, hands clasped in her lap, watching him breathe. She counted his breaths as if they were rosary beads. She memorized every detail of his face, expressive eyebrows even in repose, pale skin with traces of freckles the sun no longer touched, lips slightly parted. She started by reading the newspapers. Today, she would say in a low voice, the Times reports growing tensions in Afghanistan. Parliament debated for 8 hours on import tariffs, and your mother received a letter from Queen Victoria inviting us to tea, an invitation we will obviously decline given the circumstances, but Lady Victoria was immensely proud. She would pause, waiting for a response that never came. She continued anyway. After a few weeks, she began reading poetry. She discovered he loved Wordsworth. I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high o'er vales and hills. Eleanor's voice, initially hesitant, gained confidence. She read with an intonation she didn't know she possessed, emphasizing verses that seemed written for this impossible moment. For oft, when on my couch I lie in vacant or in pensive mood, they flash upon that inward eye. She cried sometimes without knowing why. The tears would fall on the book, blurring the words. Miss Roberts commented one morning, bringing in tea. I've never seen anyone so devoted, milady. Most wives in your situation would visit once a week, out of obligation. You come every day. Eleanor adjusted the covers over Sebastian, with the care of someone handling antique porcelain. He is alone, Miss Roberts. Even unconscious, I imagine loneliness can be felt. I don't want him to think that he's been abandoned. Time brought boldness. Eleanor began telling her own stories. Today I reread your school project, she would whisper, touching his hand, a hand that never reacted but which she held nonetheless. I was thinking about the children who motivated you. When I was 12, I worked at the confectionery from 5 in the morning. My hands were calloused from the hot sugar. Father said it was preparation for adult life. But I dreamed, Sebastian. I dreamed of books I couldn't buy, schools I couldn't attend. I wonder if the children who inspired you dreamed too. She would play his violin, which she had brought to his room. She played poorly, but she tried. The out-of-tune sound seemed like a prayer in a language she didn't master, but that her heart translated. And she talked about everything and nothing. The confectionery reopened yesterday. Father cried when he saw the doors unlocked. Mother was able to get up for the first time in months. She came to visit me. She brought a spice cake, the one you ordered before everything. I saved a slice for you. When you wake up, we'll try it together. If you wake up, her voice would falter at those times. She would rest her head on the bed next to his body, allowing herself moments of despair. Please, Sebastian. Not for me. I know you don't know me. You owe me nothing. But for the man you were, for the dreams you had, for the children who were waiting for your school, come back. Come back from the silent place where you are trapped. It was on one of these mornings that she noticed the servants watching her with changed expressions. Mr. Harrison, the butler, revealed in a low voice, Milady, I shouldn't say this, but Lord Sebastian was the best of us. When my grandson lost his fingers in a factory accident, it was his lordship who paid for the treatment, took the boy out of the machines, and put him in school. He did that for dozens of children. He forbade us to speak of it, said that charity was not a currency for admiration, seeing you care for him with such devotion. I am beginning to think the universe has a strange sense of justice. Miss Clara, a young maid, confessed with tears. When my sister became pregnant out of wedlock and her family cast her out, Lady Victoria wanted to dismiss her. Lord Sebastian intervened. He gave her a cottage, paid for a midwife, and said an innocent child should not pay for adult judgments. He saved us, my lady. And now you are saving him. Eleanor slowly understood she was not caring for a stranger. She was honoring a man who had dedicated his entire life to caring for others. 3 months after the wedding, on a night when she broke protocol, Eleanor stayed beyond the established time. The nurse had fallen asleep in the armchair in the hallway. The moon shone through the window, turning the room into a silver aquarium. She sat on the edge of his bed, a boldness she had never had before. "Sebastian," she whispered in the darkness, "I know you can't hear me. Perhaps you never will. But I need to say, the poison that brought you here came from my hands. They were my contaminated creams. Every day I carry this guilt like a stone tied around my neck, sinking me." She touched his face gently, tracing the line of his jaw. "I married you out of obligation. It would be a lie to deny it, but I remain here for something different. I've read your diaries, Sebastian. Forgive the intrusion. I've read about your dreams, your struggles, your radical kindness in a cruel aristocratic world. I'm in love with a man I have never seen awake, with a soul I met through written words and recounted deeds. It's madness, I know, but..." Tears fell onto his face. "But I love you. I love the man who saves children in secret, who designs schools instead of stables for expensive horses, who writes about injustice when the aristocracy prefers to ignore it. I love you, Sebastian Ashford, and if you never awaken, I will carry this love alone like a candle lit in an empty room." She leaned down, kissing his forehead softly, and then, for the second time since the wedding, his fingers moved, not a spasm. A deliberate movement as if trying to reach for something. His hand tensed, fingers curling as if to grasp. Eleanor held her breath. "Sebastian." Nothing more." But for an impossible instant, she felt as if he was fighting. Fighting to come back from a place so distant it had no name. Fighting towards her voice, the only anchor in the ocean of unconsciousness. Miss Roberts, waking with a start, hurried in. She consulted the medical instruments, noted in her notebook. Slight movement of the fingers. 2:17 a.m., likely a reflex, but she looked at Eleanor with an expression that said, perhaps it's not just a reflex. And Eleanor, returning to her own rooms as dawn painted the sky pink, knew with an inexplicable certainty he was listening to her. Somehow, somewhere beyond consciousness, Sebastian Ashford heard every word. And maybe, just maybe, he was trying to find his way back. The locket was hidden in a secret compartment of the desk. Eleanor hadn't intended to find it. She was organizing the estate's administrative papers as Lady Victoria had requested. The mechanism accidentally gave way under the pressure of her fingers, revealing a tiny drawer no one was meant to discover. Inside was a painted miniature. Eleanor held it up to the light of the window, a knot forming in her stomach. The woman in the portrait was of an almost offensive beauty. Hair like wheat under the summer sun, styled in perfect curls. Immense blue eyes with dark lashes. Porcelain skin that had never known a day of hard work. A delicate, aristocratic smile of the kind that promised entire worlds without a word. Eleanor turned the locket over. On the back, an inscription in delicate female handwriting, "Forever yours, Isabel." The name hung in the air like a toxic perfume. Eleanor sat down heavily. She knew, of course, that a 29-year-old man would have a past, previous loves, passions that hadn't worked out, but knowing in the abstract was different from seeing it materialized. A woman too beautiful, too aristocratic, too perfect. How could she compete with that? With a ghost framed in golden devotion? She spent days discreetly investigating. The servants, when gently pressed, revealed fragments. "Lady Isabel Pemberton," whispered Miss Clara, "daughter of the Duke of Pemberton. Everyone said she and Lord Sebastian would marry. They were in love like characters from a romance. But the Duke forbade it. The Ashfords are a minor viscountcy, the Pembertons a historic duchy. She obeyed her father, married the Earl of Ravencroft. Lord Sebastian was shattered. He was never the same. Mr. Harrison, more reluctant, admitted he kept that locket like a relic. He would open it when he thought he was alone. After she married, he fell into a terrible depression. He traveled Europe for 2 years trying to forget. But some people we never forget." Eleanor's heart constricted painfully. It was Lady Victoria who, noticing her daughter-in-law's distress, sat with her in the conservatory on a rainy afternoon. The sound of water against the glass created a melancholy soundtrack. "You've found out about Isabel." It wasn't a question. Eleanor nodded, unable to lie to a woman who read faces like maps. "She's beautiful," she said simply, and an aristocrat, and everything I am not. Lady Victoria poured tea with measured movements. Isabel Pemberton, now Countess Ravencroft, represents who Sebastian was at 20, a romantic idealist who believed love could conquer all. Reality, as it often does, destroyed that illusion. She paused, sipping the bitter tea. The Duke of Pemberton is a man who values people by their titles and properties. A viscountcy was not enough for his daughter. Isabel, raised in aristocratic obedience, chose duty over love. Sebastian never blamed her. He blamed the system, the hierarchies, the world that values birth over feeling. He loved her deeply, Eleanor said, her voice small. He loved the idea of her, Lady Victoria corrected. Eleanor, love at 20 is a fever. Intense, consuming, but transient. Isabel was Sebastian's fever. You, the grey eyes fixed on the brown ones, are the cure. Less dramatic, less poetic, but infinitely more valuable. Eleanor did not feel comforted. That night in her rooms, she cried with a violence that surprised herself. Jealousy of a ghost. Envy of a woman she might never see. Anger at her own inadequacy. She found an unsent letter tucked between the pages of a poetry book. Dated 1836, 2 years before the accident. Isabel, 2 years have passed since I last saw you, at the ball where you announced your engagement. I remember the dress, blue like your eyes. I remember how you avoided my gaze. I do not blame you. I will never blame you. But do you know that I still love you? That I build schools thinking of the children we would have had? That I play the violin imagining you can still hear me? The love I feel is not a memory. It is a wound that will not heal. The doctors would say I need time. 1,000 days have passed. When does the healing come? Or is true love the kind that never heals, and we just learn to live with the pain? Eleanor read and reread it until she had memorized every word. She was a substitute wife, never the true choice. A marriage of convenience that had become a solitary vigil. She loved an unconscious man who, upon waking, would see in her only a reminder of a forced marriage, an inadequate bourgeois wife, a poor substitute for the perfect duchess who got away. The next morning she couldn't bring herself to visit Sebastian. She sent her apologies via Miss Roberts, a migraine, a need for rest. But Lady Victoria appeared in her rooms in the afternoon, entering without permission. "Get up," she ordered, without kindness. Visits of self-pity are not permitted at Ashford Manor. Eleanor, still in her nightgown, looked up with red-rimmed eyes. "My lady, I've discovered I am a ghost living in the house of another ghost. Forgive me if I need time to absorb this." Lady Victoria sat on the edge of the bed, a surprising gesture of intimacy. "Foolish. Child, listen to me carefully." Her voice softened imperceptibly. "Isabel represented who Sebastian was, a young man who believed in fairy tales. You represent who he became, a man who chose action over romanticism, charity over passion. If my son awakens, he will discover that the universe has given him not the love he desired at 20, but the love he needs at 30. She held Eleanor's chin, forcing eye contact. Isabel would have been a suitable wife for an ordinary aristocrat. But Sebastian is not ordinary. He needs a partner who understands sacrifice, work, dedication, qualities that an aristocratic birth rarely teaches. He needs you, Eleanor, even if he doesn't know it yet." She stood up, walking to the door. "Now wash your face, dress appropriately, and go care for your husband. Jealousy is a luxury none of us can afford." And she left, leaving Eleanor alone with an impossible dilemma. How to fight a ghost? How to compete with a woman idealized by absence, sanctified by loss? She had no answer. But she got up anyway, washed her face and dressed. She walked to Sebastian's rooms with trembling legs. She entered. He remained motionless, oblivious to the dramas unfolding around him. Eleanor sat down, picked up a poetry book. Open to a random page, she began to read, her voice shaking only slightly. "She walks in beauty like the night of cloudless climes and starry skies." She paused, looking at his unconscious face. "You are a fool, Sebastian Ashford," she whispered. "Loving a ghost when reality is right here, desperately trying to be worthy of you. But maybe true love is precisely this, not competing, just remaining. Even knowing you may never choose me." She continued reading until nightfall, her voice gaining strength with each verse. And if someone had been watching closely, they would have seen, when Eleanor held his hand at the end of her visit, his fingers curl slightly, as if trying to hold hers back. Or perhaps it was just hope disguised as movement. The storm arrived in March with the fury of an offended goddess. Winds howled around Ashford Manor, rattling ancient window panes that trembled under the impact. Lightning tore through the English sky, turning night into day for fractions of a second. Thunder sounded like celestial artillery, echoing through the empty corridors. Eleanor couldn't sleep. Something about the storm's violence resonated with her inner turmoil. 7 months of vigils, 7 months of unanswered words, 7 months of impossible love accumulating like water before a flood. At 2 in the morning, she put on a robe and walked through the hallways. Miss Roberts was ill, replaced by a younger nurse who had fallen asleep in the armchair in the corridor, overcome by a long shift. Eleanor entered Sebastian's room. Candles flickered, casting dancing shadows. He remained as he always was, motionless, distant, trapped somewhere she couldn't reach. She sat on the edge of the bed, a boldness the months had made permissible. "You're probably tired of hearing me," she said quietly. "If you can hear me. Dr. Whitmore says you can't, that it's all reflex, meaningless muscle spasms. But I feel it, Sebastian. I feel that you are fighting." A flash of lightning illuminated the room, revealing every detail of his face. "I'm going to say something insane. Perhaps I need to say it before I lose my courage completely." She took a deep breath, her heart racing. "I'm in love with you. With a man who has never seen me awake, who doesn't know my name except on legal documents. I fell in love with your dreams, with the children you saved, with the school you wanted to build, with the way you see the world not as it is but as it should be." Tears began to fall, hot against her own cold skin. "I found out about Isabel. I know I am a substitute, never the true choice. If you awaken and despise me for being a bourgeois woman who invaded your life, I will bear it. But I needed to say it once, even if you never hear it. I love you, Sebastian Ashford. I love the man you are when no one is watching. I love your radical kindness, your anger at injustice, your tenderness with the vulnerable." She leaned in, kissing his forehead with infinite gentleness. "Come back, not for me, but for the people who need you, for the children waiting for your school, for the world that desperately needs men who choose compassion over convenience." And then, his hand moved. Not a reflex, not a spasm. A deliberate, strong, impossible movement. He grasped her wrist. Eleanor cried out, a mixture of shock and terror and impossible hope. His eyes opened slowly, like heavy curtains being drawn after years. Eyelids struggling against the weight, pupils dilating, trying to focus on a world he hadn't seen in 7 months. His mouth moved, chapped lips forming sounds that became a word. Eleanor. The name came out hoarse. An unused voice turned into an out-of-tune instrument. Eleanor was crying uncontrollably now, holding his face in both her hands. Yes, I'm Eleanor." "You're awake!" "Thank all the saints you're awake." He tried to sit up, his atrophied muscles protesting. Eleanor helped him, propping him against the pillows. Confusion was evident in his eyes. Grey-green, Eleanor discovered, a colour she had never seen before. "Where? How long?" 7 months, my lord. You've had a brain fever since the ball. You hit your head, fell into a coma. The doctors had lost hope, but..." Her voice failed her. "But I never lost hope." He looked around slowly, taking in the details. He saw the ring on her finger. He looked at his own hand, a wedding band he didn't remember putting on. "You are my wife?" Eleanor nodded, unable to speak. He closed his eyes, trying to piece together fragments of memory. When he reopened them, there was something different, a hazy recognition. "I remember. Your voice. For months or weeks. Time didn't exist there, but your voice did. Reading poetry, telling stories, talking about my school." His free hand rose, touching his own face as if to confirm its solidity. "I was in a dark place, Eleanor. So dark, completely alone. But your voice was like a thin thread connecting me to something. Reality, perhaps." I couldn't respond, I couldn't wake up. But I could hear. He focused on her completely for the first time, truly seeing her. "I recognize your voice. It's the voice that brought me back." Eleanor sobbed, kneeling beside the bed, holding his hands as if they were an anchor. "I thought I would lose you. Everyone thought so. But I couldn't give up, I couldn't..." "Listen," he whispered, forcing her to look up. "I heard you when you said you loved me. That night, seconds before I woke up. I thought it was a dream, a final fragment of consciousness creating a fantasy. But was it real?" Eleanor was trembling all over. "It was real, it is real. I know you have no obligation to reciprocate, that our marriage was a contract of necessity," he completed, slowly remembering. "Lady Victoria explained it to me after just now. We married while I was unconscious. To save the inheritance, and to save your family from the consequences of the ball." A heavy silence fell between them. "Eleanor Hartwell, forgive me, Eleanor Ashford." He squeezed her hands. "I do not wish for an annulment. I wish to know the woman who cared for an unconscious stranger as if they had been lovers for decades. The woman who read poetry in the dark, who played a violin out of tune, who whispered confessions thinking they would not be heard." He touched her face gently. a tentative gesture from someone who had forgotten how to touch another human being. I heard every word, every story, every moment you cried beside me thinking you were alone. You were my companion in an abyss no one else could reach. If there is a debt between us, Eleanor, it is I who owe it. The nurse, awakened by the commotion, ran to fetch Dr. Whitmore and Lady Victoria. Soon the room was filled with doctors, servants, exclamations of a miracle. But Eleanor and Sebastian remained looking at each other through the chaos, as if discovering for the first time that they were not alone. That love sometimes is born not from the first glance, but from the last whisper before giving up. Not under a radiant sun, but in the darkness of a storm. And that waking up can mean many things. Opening one's eyes, certainly, but also finally seeing. The first weeks after awakening were a silent battle against a but forgotten. Sebastian had lost 20 pounds. His muscles, once strong from riding and working in the gardens, had atrophied into fragile cords under pale skin. He needed to lean on Eleanor just to walk to the window, a distance of 15 steps that felt like miles. Slowly, she would murmur, her arm firm around his waist. "You're in no hurry. The world will wait." He would laugh bitterly. "I feel like a baby learning to walk." Humiliating for a 29-year-old Viscount. "Humility is a virtue," Eleanor would reply, smiling gently. "And I don't see a baby. I see a man with the courage to rebuild himself." Dr. Whitmore prescribed gradual exercises, finger flexes, wrist rotations, walks across the room that extended to the hallway, then the staircase, and finally the gardens. Eleanor accompanied every step. She had become his nurse, his physical therapist, his constant companion. She massaged his stiffened muscles with oils prepared by the cook. She told him about the estate's management while he regained his strength. She read him months of accumulated correspondence, but mostly they talked. "Tell me about yourself," Sebastian asked one afternoon, sitting in the conservatory. April had brought the first flowers, brave yellow daffodils under a timid sun. "I know you're a confectioner's daughter, that our marriage saved your family. But who is Eleanor beyond the circumstances?" Eleanor hesitated, unaccustomed to being the center of attention. "There's not much to tell. I worked at the confectionery since I was 12. I learned the chemistry of ingredients, how sugar caramelizes at specific temperatures, how yeast reacts to acidity. Father said I had a talent, but..." She shrugged. "Talents don't matter when you're a bourgeois woman. My destiny was to marry well, have children, and manage a household. Did you want more?" "I wanted to understand the world," she admitted softly. "When I read about Lavoisier and his experiments or Newton and his laws, I felt a connection, as if there were a universal language we could all learn, regardless of birth." Sebastian listened with an attention few men offered women. "And now, what do you want now?" Eleanor looked at her hands, calloused from years of work, but which had also cared for him with infinite tenderness. "I want to help you build your school," she said finally. "I want children like I was to have chances I never had. And I want," she blushed, "I want to know you. Really know you. Not through diaries and stories, but through conversations, shared days, a life lived together." He held out his hand. Eleanor took it. Their fingers intertwined naturally, as if they had always belonged that way. "Then we will start from the beginning, Eleanor Ashford, not as a contract or an obligation, but as two people discovering if they can build something real from an impossible situation." The days that followed were constant revelations. Sebastian taught her how to draw architectural plans. They sat side by side at his drafting table, Eleanor holding a pencil with the same precision she used to decorate cakes. "See these lines?" Sebastian would point. "They are structural supports. Everything we build needs a foundation, even dreams." Eleanor drew wide windows in the designed school, copying his style. "And these windows will bring light to children who have always worked in the dark." He also taught her about astronomy. On clear nights, they went up to the private observatory on the roof. The telescope that had belonged to his father revealed universes. "Jupiter," Sebastian pointed, adjusting the focus. "See the moons. Galileo discovered them 200 years ago, proving that not everything revolves around the Earth. It changed how we see our place in the cosmos." Eleanor looked on, amazed. "We are so small. Small but significant," he corrected. "Every star we see died millennia ago, but its light persists, traveling through the void to reach us. True love is like that. It persists even when its source is gone." They looked at each other in the dark, surrounded by ancient constellations. Eleanor in turn taught him about confectionery. She got permission from Lady Victoria to use the Manners kitchen, an aristocratic scandal, a Viscountess cooking like a servant. "Chemistry is precision," she explained, weighing sugar on a delicate scale. 1 extra gram can ruin everything. but it's also intuition, knowing when the dough has reached the perfect point just by touch. Sebastian watched, fascinated, as she created sugar sculptures, impossible roses, detailed lilies. "It's art," he said reverently. "I thought confectionery was just a trade, but I see now it's ephemeral sculpture." "Ephemeral but necessary," Eleanor smiled. "Beauty that is consumed is as valuable as beauty that remains. Perhaps more so because it teaches us about impermanence." They also shared comfortable silences, afternoons where Eleanor would embroider, while Sebastian read, both in the same room, their existences intertwined without needing words. The servants watched with growing approval. Mrs. Thornton, once hostile, commented to Mr. Harrison, "I never thought I'd say this, but Lady Eleanor is good for him. She doesn't try to change him, she just amplifies who he already was." Their first public outing was to Sunday Mass in the village. The local society awaited them with ravenous curiosity. Eleanor wore a new dress that Lady Victoria had insisted on commissioning, dark blue silk with discreet lace. Sebastian, still thin but recovered, walked with only a slight limp. They entered the church hand in hand. Murmurs rippled through the pews. Some duchesses, the ones who had fallen ill at the ball, looked on with poorly disguised disdain. Others, especially the younger ones, watched with envy the couple who had survived the impossible. During the sermon, an elderly lady whispered too loudly, "A merchant's daughter using a title as if she were born to it. Shameful." Sebastian stood up in the middle of the Mass. An even greater scandal. He walked to the pulpit, interrupting the vicar. "Forgive me, Reverend, but I must say something." His voice was still weak but firm. He turned to the congregation. "Lady Eleanor Ashford is my wife before God and law. More than that, she is the woman who saved me when I was in an abyss. Any disrespect to her is disrespect to me. And I have discovered during months of darkness that a title is worth nothing compared to devotion." He returned to his seat next to Eleanor, who was holding back tears. After Mass, walking back to the manor, Sebastian held her arm firmly. "I will not allow a cruel society to diminish you, ever." "You didn't have to do that," Eleanor protested softly. "I had to, for you. And for me. Because I understood something, Eleanor." He stopped, making her look at him. "I woke up twice. First from the coma. Second, when I realized I am a different man from the one who fell asleep. And the woman by my side when I woke, you are exactly who I needed to find." He kissed her then, right there on the public path, under an April sun that was finally warming Somerset after a winter that had been too long. And Eleanor, kissing him back, felt for the first time that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't a substitute, but a true choice. May arrived with the promise of summer and an unexpected visitor. The carriage was pure opulence, lacquered in pearly white, a ducal crest on the door, lions rampant holding a crown. The horses were too perfect, their coats gleaming like mirrors. The coachman wore a livery that cost more than a common worker's annual salary. Eleanor was in the garden, cutting roses for indoor arrangements. When she heard the crunch of expensive wheels on the gravel, she straightened up, wiping the dirt from her hands. The carriage door opened. A woman of a beauty that made reality an unfair competition stepped out. Lady Isabel Ravencroft, née Pemberton, was 27 years old and looked like a Renaissance painting come to life. Her blonde hair was styled in perfect curls under a hat adorned with ostrich feathers. Her mourning dress, as she had been a widow for 3 months, was so elegantly black that it seemed a celebration, not a sorrow. An impossible waist, a neckline that suggested, without revealing, every movement calculated for maximum grace. She walked toward Eleanor with a smile that didn't reach her immense blue eyes. "Lady Ashford, I presume." Her voice was melodious, her aristocratic accent perfect. "Forgive the intrusion. I am Isabel Ravencroft, an old friend of your husband." Eleanor knew that face. She would recognize it anywhere. It was the face from the hidden locket, the face Sebastian had loved to the point of destruction. "Lady Ravencroft," she tried to keep her voice steady, "welcome to Ashford Manor. Shall I call for Lord Ashford? I would be immensely grateful." The meeting took place in the main hall. Sebastian, who had been working in his study, came down when called. When he saw Isabel, he stopped on the last step. His face cycled through complex emotions, shock, recognition, something that might have been old pain resurfacing. Isabel ran to him with the grace of a ballerina, tears glistening perfectly in her eyes. "Sebastian, when I heard of your illness, of your miraculous awakening, I couldn't remain in London without seeing it for myself." She hugged him, a gesture far too intimate for a casual friendship. Sebastian responded automatically, then pulled away with visible discomfort. He glanced at Eleanor, who was watching from the doorway, trying to maintain a neutral expression. "Isabel, I wasn't expecting." "It's been a long time." Too long, she replied softly. My husband passed away 3 months ago. I am finally free from a marriage that was a gilded cage. She looked meaningfully at Eleanor when she said, gilded cage. The following days were a refined torture. Isabel took up residence at a neighboring property, Ravencroft Estate, inherited from her late earl just 5 miles away. She visited Ashford Manor almost daily. She brought books Sebastian had mentioned wanting years ago. She recited poetry they both had loved. She played the piano. Chopin, Mozart, complex compositions Eleanor would never learn. She rode with him through the fields, both moving in the perfect synchrony of those who had shared that activity hundreds of times. Eleanor watched from the window, each ride seeming to remove another brick from the foundation she thought she had been building. Isabel was everything Eleanor was not. Refined where Eleanor was practical. Educated in the arts where Eleanor mastered chemistry. A natural aristocrat where Eleanor was a struggling intruder. Worse, she knew Sebastian intimately. She made references to shared moments Eleanor would never have. Remember when we went to the opera? Isabel laughed during a dinner that Lady Victoria had reluctantly organized. And you said you'd rather listen to children laughing than sopranos singing. Sebastian smiled involuntarily, a memory surfacing. Did I say that? I was terribly rude. You were terribly honest. One of the things that, a dramatic pause, that I always admired. She looked meaningfully at Eleanor when she said uncommon. Eleanor, seated next to Sebastian, felt completely invisible. It was after one of these visits that Isabel found Eleanor alone in the garden. Lady Ashford, may we speak frankly? Eleanor straightened up, bracing herself. Isabel sat on the stone bench, arranging her skirts with studied perfection. Sebastian and I were separated by the tyranny of my late father. The Duke would not allow his daughter to marry a minor viscount. I obeyed as an obedient daughter does. I married Ravencroft, a man 30 years my senior, cruel, controlling. 5 years of hell. She looked directly at Eleanor. I survived by dreaming that one day I would be free, that Sebastian and I would have a second chance. Now I am a widow, mistress of my own properties, independent, and I discover that he has married under peculiar circumstances. Our marriage is legal, Eleanor defended herself. Legal, certainly. But was it his choice? Really? Isabel leaned in. Eleanor, may I call you that? We both know Sebastian was unconscious. He would never have chosen you under other circumstances. Not for lack of your qualities, but simply because you are not of our world. Every word was a calculated blow. Sebastian deserves to choose for love, not out of a forced contract. If you truly love him, let him be free to decide. Propose an annulment. He can then choose consciously between a wife on paper and the love of his youth. Eleanor felt nausea rise. Because there was a painful truth there. He is free, she answered with a dignity she barely maintained. I have never held him captive. If he wishes to end our marriage, I will respect it. But as long as you remain married, he will not feel free. Aristocratic obligation, a sense of honor, these things will keep him tied to you. Is it truly love you desire? Or just a title? She stood, smoothing her skirts. Think about it, my dear. You can learn etiquette, but you will never have the blood. Your children will be half aristocrats, always questioned. Society will never fully accept you. Is that what you wish for Sebastian? A marriage where his wife is a constant reminder of inadequacy? And she left, leaving poison to bloom like a weed in Eleanor's carefully tended garden. That night, Eleanor couldn't sleep. At 2 in the morning, she walked through the corridors, unintentionally arriving at Sebastian's apartments. He was awake, sitting by the fireplace, contemplating the flames. Eleanor, he didn't seem surprised. You can't sleep either, she entered hesitantly. Isabel said something today that disturbed me. He sighed, gesturing for her to sit. I can imagine. Isabel has always been persuasive. A heavy silence fell. Sebastian, Eleanor forced herself to ask, do you regret it? That we married? Now that Isabel has returned free, do you still love her? He completed bitterly. Yes, she's made that clear. He looked at Eleanor through the dancing flames. For years Isabel represented what if? What if we had married? What if she had defied her father? What if I had been important enough? He stood up, walking to the window. But what ifs are ghosts, Eleanor. They are not real life. Isabel and I were a youthful passion, intense, dramatic, doomed to disappointment, because no real relationship survives idealization. He turned around. You are different. You are not a fantasy I built. You are a reality that chose me, when I had nothing to offer but an unconscious body and an uncertain future. That means infinitely more. Eleanor felt hot tears welling. But she is perfect for you. She understands your world, shares your past. And you, he interrupted, kneeling in front of Eleanor. Understand my present and wish to build my future. The difference is crucial. He took her hands. I won't lie and say that seeing Isabel didn't affect me. It did. Memories are powerful, but Eleanor, love is not nostalgia. It is a conscious choice renewed daily. And I choose you. I choose the woman who read poetry in the dark, who held my hand when no one believed I would return, who loves not the Viscount, but the man. He kissed her with an intensity he had never shown before. It was not a kiss of gratitude. It was a promise. And Eleanor, kissing him back, thought that perhaps ghosts could be exorcised. That perhaps real imperfect love, built brick by brick, was stronger than a passion idealized by absence. But the next morning, when she saw Isabel arriving again, her smile perfectly calculated, she knew the battle was far from over. June brought unusual heat to Somerset, and a formal dinner that Lady Victoria organized against all of Eleanor's protests. Society needs to see you together, the Viscountess had insisted. Rumors are spreading. We must demonstrate the solidity of your marriage. 40 aristocratic guests, Chinese porcelain dinnerware that had survived 3 centuries, silverware polished to a mirror shine, genuine beeswax candles, not common tallow, flowers brought specially from London, and Isabel, of course. It was impossible not to invite her without causing a greater scandal. Eleanor dressed with the help of a maid, her hands trembling as she fastened the jewels loaned by Lady Victoria, diamonds that had belonged to 3 generations of viscountesses. I look beautiful, she murmured to her reflection. But beauty doesn't change blood. Sebastian appeared at the door, elegant in his evening suit. He watched her in silence before speaking. You look radiant, but also terrified. Eleanor turned. How do I fight a ghost, Sebastian? How do I compete with the history you two share? He approached, taking her hands. There is no competition. There is no battle. Isabel represents who I was. You represent who I choose to be. But she knows you so deeply. She knew a version of me that no longer exists. Eleanor, the man who woke up after 7 months in darkness is not the same one who fell asleep. And the woman who brought me back, he touched her face gently. You are the co-author of who I have become. The dinner began with all the Victorian pomp, superficial conversations about the weather, the harvest, aristocratic gossip. Eleanor sat to Sebastian's right, with Isabel strategically positioned across from them. During the soup, the Duchess of Hartfield commented, her voice too loud to be accidental, Lady Ashford, I hear you were a confectioner before your marriage. How peculiar. A ripple of snickers went around the table. Eleanor replied with a calm she did not feel. Yes, Your Grace, my family has owned a respected confectionery for 40 years. We learned the value of honest work. Work, repeated the Duchess. How exotic for a Viscountess. Sebastian intervened, his voice icy. My wife knows a value that many here will never comprehend, the dignity of one's own effort, something our privileged classes might do well to learn. An awkward silence. Isabel smoothed the tension with a charming smile. Sebastian has always championed uncommon causes. It's one of his most admirable qualities. She looked meaningfully at Eleanor when she said uncommon. Between courses, Isabel dominated the conversation. References to social events Eleanor had never attended. Inside jokes with aristocrats who shared decades of history. Every comment underscored the difference between her and Eleanor. One born to that world, the other a permanent intruder. During dessert, a cruel irony, elaborate pastries very similar to the ones that had caused the original tragedy, Lord Pemberton, Isabel's cousin, said, Lady Isabel, how are the plans for your estate coming along? I hear rumors of extensive renovations. Isabel smiled mysteriously. I am considering making Ravenscroft Estate my permanent residence. I've grown tired of London. Somerset has always been my true home. She looked directly at Sebastian. And there are sentimental reasons as well. Places where one has been happy deserve to be revisited. The dinner ended with liqueurs in the drawing room. The gentlemen separated to smoke cigars. The ladies for feminine conversation. Eleanor found herself surrounded by women who dissected her with sharp glances. It must be challenging, commented Lady Hartfield with false sweetness, to adjust to aristocratic responsibilities. So many unwritten rules. I learn daily, Eleanor replied diplomatically. Some learn etiquette, Isabel interjected softly. Others are born with it. There is a difference, don't you agree? Eleanor felt anger rising, not for the first time but with a new intensity. I agree completely, Lady Isabel. Some are born with titles and behave as if that replaces character. Others acquire their position through sacrifice and understand the true meaning of nobility. There were audible gasps. Isabel smiled, but her eyes froze. My dear, I did not mean to offend. I simply observe that a marriage based on convenience rarely satisfies deep emotional needs, and marriages based on adolescent passion, Eleanor retorted, often ignore the foundations necessary for a lasting commitment. Tension filled the room like smoke. It was Lady Victoria who ended the confrontation. I believe we are all tired. Perhaps we should rejoin the gentlemen. Later, after the guests had departed and the manor fell silent, Eleanor was in the library, trying to calm her trembling hands. Sebastian found her there and sat beside her. Did you hear about my confrontation with Isabel? Servants gossip about everything. He smiled slightly. You defended yourself magnificently. I felt crude, rude, not aristocratic. You felt human. There is a difference. A comfortable silence settled. Sebastian, Eleanor asked softly, Isabel dined with you afterward. I saw you on the terrace. What did you talk about? Hetty sighed. She was direct. She proposed that I annul our marriage. She said she is free now, that we deserve a second chance, that true love doesn't die, it only waits. Eleanor's heart constricted painfully. And you... What did you answer? He took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. I told her that true love is not one that waits passively for decades. It's one that appears when we least expect it, that saves us when we are sinking, that chooses to stay when it would be easier to leave. He pulled her closer. I told her that I am married not just legally but in spirit, to a woman who knew me at my worst and chose to love me anyway. Isabel represents a beautiful past, but you, Eleanor, are my imperfect present and my possible future, and I choose the future. Eleanor cried then, not from sadness but from devastating relief. I'm so afraid, she confessed, that I'm not enough. That you'll wake up one day and realize you traded a duchess for a confectioner. I woke up from a coma, he said firmly, and found not a confectioner, but an extraordinary woman whom confectionery no longer defines any more than a viscountcy defines me. We are more than our titles and professions, Eleanor. We are the choices we make. They kissed there among the ancient books and new promises. But through the window, invisible to both, Isabel watched from her carriage before departing. Her perfect face finally revealed a genuine emotion, not sadness but cold determination. She would not give up so easily. After all she had learned from childhood, aristocracy does not lose to the bourgeoisie. It was a matter of principle, and Lady Isabel Pemberton Ravencroft always got what she wanted, eventually. August arrived with sweltering heat and a decision that could no longer be postponed. Sebastian woke Eleanor before dawn, touching her shoulder gently. She had been sleeping in her own rooms. They still maintained separate quarters, a remnant of a marriage that had begun under impossible circumstances. Get dressed, he whispered. I want to show you something. The buggy was waiting at the stables. He drove her through fields gilded by the first light, the dew sparkling like fake diamonds on the grass. They didn't speak. The silence had a contemplative quality, not an uncomfortable one. 20 minutes later, they stopped before an empty plot of land on the edge of the estate. There was nothing there but wild grass, a few ancient trees, and a view of the valley below where Somerset stretched out in a patchwork of green and brown. Eleanor got down, confused. Where are we? Sebastian walked to the center of the plot, turning slowly. When he looked at her, there was an intense emotion on his face. This is the place, Eleanor, where I planned to build the school 3 years ago. I chose this specific plot because in the morning the sun rises exactly there, he pointed east, and in the afternoon, the shadows of those trees would protect the children from the heat. Water from a nearby stream, easy access from the villages. Perfect. He walked back to her, taking her hands. But I never had the courage to start. There were always reasons. Not enough money or time or Lady Victoria's approval. But the truth was I was afraid. Afraid of failing, of the dream proving impossible. He knelt there in the damp grass, completely unbecoming of a viscount. Eleanor gasped. Sebastian, what? Let me speak, his voice trembled. During months in darkness, I heard your voice reading about this project. I heard you promise that if I woke up, you would help me build it. That promise was an anchor, Eleanor. When everything was absolute darkness, your voice saying we will build it together was the only point of light. Tears streamed openly down his face. I married you while unconscious. I woke up married, but now, Eleanor Ashford, I wish to truly marry. Not out of obligation or necessity, by choice. I choose you over Isabel, over any aristocratic woman society would approve of. I choose you because you are brave, dedicated, and possess a kindness that no title can buy. He took a ring from his pocket, not the Ashford family ring she already wore, but a new one. Simple, gold with a single small emerald. I had this made for you. Not an heirloom from dead generations, but something of our own. Eleanor, will you renew your vows with me? Here in this place that represents our future, with no witnesses but the rising sun. Eleanor dropped to her knees as well, hugging him with a force that nearly toppled them both. Yes, 1,000 times yes. There, under a sky transforming from indigo to pink to gold, they repeated their vows. No vicar, no witnesses, no Victorian pomp. Just two people choosing each other. I, Sebastian Ashford, take you, Eleanor, to be my true wife. I promise to build with you not only this school, but a life where love overcomes class. I, Eleanor Ashford, take you, Sebastian, to be my chosen husband. I promise to stand by your side in light and darkness, in approval and scandal. They sealed their promises with a kiss that tasted of dew and new beginnings. They returned to the manor different people. Something had fundamentally changed. They were no longer victims of circumstance, but architects of their own destiny. That afternoon, Isabel appeared unannounced. A final attempt. She found Sebastian in his study, Eleanor deliberately absent to give him the privacy he had insisted was unnecessary. Sebastian, Isabel began, I'm leaving for London tomorrow. Before I go, I must ask one last time, are you sure? Sure of choosing a marriage of convenience over real love? Sebastian rose from his desk and walked toward her. For the first time, Isabel saw in him not the infatuated youth of her memory, but a completely transformed man. Isabel, I loved you when I was 20. That love was real, but it was the love of someone who didn't yet know who he would become. It shattered me when you left. For years I idealized you. But idealizations are dangerous. They turn real people into impossible ghosts. He took her hands gently, but without romanticism. Eleanor is not an idealized youthful love. She is the love of an adult man who almost died and understood what truly matters. She represents a conscious choice, not a passion that happens to us. Their choice, Isabel, is infinitely more powerful. He released her hands, stepping back respectfully. You are important. You will always be a part of my story. But Eleanor is my present and my future. I wish you genuine happiness, Isabel. But that happiness cannot be with me. Isabel remained motionless for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice had a wounded but authentic dignity. So the bourgeois woman has defeated the Duchess's daughter. A bitter half-smile. Perhaps that says more about who I have become than about her. I spent my entire life obeying rules, keeping up appearances. She simply loved. Without calculation, without strategy. She walked to the door, pausing at the threshold. Take care of her, Sebastian, and let her take care of you. Apparently you two understand something about love that I still need to learn. She left that afternoon. The pearly white carriage disappeared down the dusty road, taking with it a ghost that had haunted them for years. Sebastian watched until she was completely gone, then turned and found Eleanor at the entrance to the study, an uncertain expression on her face. Did you hear? Part of it. I didn't mean to spy, but... He pulled her into a strong embrace. It's over. The past is finally in the past. Eleanor buried her face in his chest, inhaling the scent she had come to associate with home, drafting ink, old books, something uniquely Sebastian. I'm afraid I'll wake up and find this is a dream, that you'll fall back into a coma, and it will all have been just a cruel fantasy. Then we will stay awake together, he whispered against her hair, and we will build something so real that no dream could ever compete. That night, for the first time since their wedding, Eleanor slept in Sebastian's rooms. Not as a carnal act, there was still shyness, still a need for time, but as an act of deeper intimacy. Two bodies intertwined, two hearts beating in a synchronized rhythm, two souls that finally found rest in each other. And when dawn broke, with golden light filtering through the half-open curtains, Eleanor woke first. She watched Sebastian sleep, his breath peaceful, his face relaxed, his hand resting over her heart like an anchor. He was no fairy tale prince. He was a real man with scars and imperfections, but he was hers, and she was his. As that, Eleanor discovered with an almost painful surprise, was infinitely better than any fantasy. The months that followed were ones of construction, both literal and metaphorical. September arrived with golden leaves, and the first bricks being laid on the school grounds. Sebastian hired an architect from London to supervise, but he insisted on working personally. He could be seen, sleeves rolled up, sweat on his brow, carrying timber alongside the hired workers. Eleanor scandalized the aristocracy by visiting the construction site daily. She wore simple dresses, her hair in a practical braid, distributing fresh water and pastries she prepared in the manor's kitchens for the laborers. A Lady Ashford should not be here, Mrs. Thornton had initially protested. It is not proper. Then impropriety will be my trademark, Eleanor had replied serenely. Lady Victoria, observing from the terrace with binoculars, commented to Mr. Harrison, "My son has chosen an extraordinary woman. I finally understand." The school took shape slowly, walls rising brick by brick, large windows being installed to capture maximum light, a sturdy but not oppressive roof. Every detail reflected Sebastian's philosophy: beauty through functionality, dignity through simplicity. Eleanor supervised an adjacent garden where the children would play. She planted roses, lavenders, and aromatic herbs. She created a small orchard with apple trees. "So the children know where food comes from," she explained to Sebastian. "Many work in factories without ever seeing a fruit tree." He kissed her right there amidst the mud and plants, without worrying about the workers watching. In October, Hartwell & Cubby's confectionery finally regained its prestigious place. Eleanor developed a special biscuit recipe, a blend of Indian spices with French techniques, which she presented to Queen Victoria during a royal visit to Bath. The Queen, tasting it delicately, declared, "Extraordinary. Lady Ashford, your talent is wasted in aristocratic drawing rooms. These biscuits deserve royal recognition." She granted the confectionery the title of Royal Purveyor to the Crown. The scandal of the poisoned ball was officially forgiven. Eleanor's father wept upon receiving the royal certificate. "Daughter, you have saved not only our lives but our name." "I did not save it alone, father. I married a man who understands that a mistake does not define a person. Repentance and reparation do." Eleanor's mother, completely recovered, visited the manor weekly. She developed an unlikely friendship with Lady Victoria, both strong women who respected each other's determination. "Your daughter has a spine of steel covered in silk," Lady Victoria commented one afternoon over tea. "She inherited her father's resilience and my stubbornness." Mrs. Hartwell smiled. In November, Eleanor realized her period was late. Initially, she said nothing, afraid of false hope. But when a second week passed, she sought out Dr. Whitmore. He examined her with medical professionalism, then smiled. "Lady Ashford, congratulations. You're expecting a child." Eleanor sat down heavily. Her hands went instinctively to her still flat stomach. A life. A new life growing from a love born in impossible circumstances. She told Sebastian that night in his study. He was reviewing the school plans, concentrated. "Sebastian, He didn't look up. "I will be busy for the next few months." "With what?" "Still distracted. Preparing a nursery. And then caring for a baby." His pencil stopped. He slowly raised his eyes, comprehension dawning gradually. "Eleanor, are you saying—" "I'm pregnant." He knocked over his chair as he shot to his feet. He crossed the study in 3 strides, sweeping her into his arms and spinning her around. "A baby! We're having a baby!" He was laughing and crying simultaneously, kissing her repeatedly. "Our child, Eleanor, a child who will grow up knowing that love overcomes class, that kindness matters more than birth, that has a slightly dramatic father," she interrupted with a smile. He gently set her down, kneeling to be at the level of her belly. "Hello, little one," he whispered, touching her through the fabric. "You can't hear me yet, but I'm your father. And I promise you a better world than the one I was born into. I promise you a school where all children will learn, regardless of their origin. I promise you will never feel shame for your mother being bourgeois or your father being an aristocrat. You will simply be loved." Eleanor touched his hair, tears streaming down her face. "Will we be good parents?" "We will be imperfect parents who try very hard," he answered, standing up and hugging her. "And that, I believe, is all a child truly needs." December brought the first snow and a nearly completed school. The exterior was finished, the interior in its final stages. They hired a teacher, Miss Patricia Thornton, Mrs. Thornton's niece, a young woman with a degree in pedagogy from the University of Edinburgh. "But she is a woman," some aristocrats protested. "Women should not teach." "Women are often better educators," Sebastian had replied firmly. "Miss Thornton is exceptional. If society does not approve, society can stay away." Eleanor adored Miss Patricia immediately, a 23-year-old with a sharp intellect and a genuine passion for education. "Lady Ashford," Patricia said during her interview, "I have always dreamed of teaching poor children, but conventional schools refuse to hire them, saying women are unsuitable. Your school, it's a silent revolution." "Not so silent," Eleanor smiled. "We'll make enough noise for everyone to hear." On Christmas Eve, they organized a party for the tenants and employees of the manor, a tradition Sebastian insisted on reviving. The main hall filled with workers, running children and tables laden with food that Eleanor and her mother had prepared personally. Sebastian stood for a toast. "Last year at this time I was unconscious. Everyone thought I wouldn't see another Christmas. But I'm here, not just alive, but truly living for the first time." He looked at Eleanor, seated beside him. Thanks to a woman who refused to give up when it would have been easier, who taught me that true love is not a romantic destiny, but a daily choice, and who demonstrated that real nobility comes not from blood, but from actions. He raised his glass. To my extraordinary wife, to the school we will open in February, and to a future where the children of all aristocrats, bourgeois, workers will have equal chances. Applause erupted. Children shouted excitedly, and Eleanor, holding Sebastian's hand, felt for the first time that she truly belonged, not as a tolerated intruder, but as an integral part of something bigger than herself. At midnight, it was snowing heavily. Eleanor and Sebastian walked to the school grounds, just the two of them, their footprints marking the virgin snow. The building stood out against the night sky, solid and promising. Next year at this time, Sebastian said, hugging her from behind, his hands resting on her belly where their baby grew, our child will be here. The school will be running. And all of this, he gestured to the building, to the illuminated manor in the distance, to Somerset asleep under the snow. All of this will have a different meaning. Better, Eleanor completed. Infinitely better. They kissed under the falling snow, which felt like a silent blessing, two beings who had chosen each other against all logic, against all convention. And that, they discovered, was the only kind of love that truly mattered. February of 1840 arrived with an air of suspended expectation. Eleanor was 5 months pregnant, her belly beginning to show under carefully cut dresses. She could feel the baby moving, small flutters that made her stop whatever she was doing, hands on her womb, an involuntary smile on her face. He's restless today, she would comment to Sebastian, guiding his hand to feel. He would press gently, waiting. When a kick came, his face would light up with childish wonder. Our son is a fighter, or daughter. I'm hoping for a girl, Eleanor confessed. A girl who will grow up knowing she can be more than an obedient wife, or a boy who will learn that real strength is kindness, not domination. But tension was growing for a different reason. The school's opening was set for February 15th. 50 children were enrolled, the children of factory workers, farm laborers and servants. Ages ranged from 6 to 12. Many had never held a pencil. Some didn't know how to write their own names. Miss Patricia Thornton prepared an innovative curriculum. Literacy, basic mathematics, simplified natural sciences, and, most controversially, moral education, emphasizing universal human dignity. I will teach that all people deserve respect, she had declared during a planning meeting, regardless of class or birth. Some local aristocrats protested violently. Lord Pemberton, Isabel's cousin who had remained in Somerset, sent a formal letter. Your school is dangerous. Educating the lower classes beyond their station creates discontent. Educated workers question natural authority. This will lead to revolution. Sebastian responded publicly through a letter to the Times of London. Education does not create discontent. Injustice does. Knowledge does not generate revolution. Forced ignorance does. We are building this school not to subvert order, but to fulfill the Christian promise that all are equal before God. If the aristocracy fears literate workers, perhaps we should question not education, but the system that requires ignorance to function. The letter caused a national scandal. Half the aristocracy denounced him as a dangerous radical. The other half, surprisingly, began to support him. The Duchess of Somerset sent a donation of £500. The Earl of Bristol offered books from his personal library. Other progressive aristocrats followed suit. On the morning of February 15th, the sky dawned clear and cold. Eleanor woke up with anxiety tightening her stomach. What if no one comes? What if the parents change their minds? Sebastian, adjusting his cravat in the mirror, turned. They will come, because we are offering something no parent can refuse, a better future for their children. At 8 in the morning they began to arrive, timidly at first, then in groups. Parents with calloused hands holding the hands of children, dressed in patched but clean clothes, nervous faces, eyes that mixed hope with the fear of disappointment. Eleanor and Sebastian greeted them at the door. They welcomed each family personally. Welcome to the Ashford School, Sebastian would say, kneeling to be at the children's eye level. Here you will learn that you are intelligent, capable, and worthy of knowledge. A 7-year-old girl with uneven braids whispered, Is it true we'll have our own books, sir? It's true. And when you learn to read well, you can take them home. Knowledge does not belong to us, it belongs to you. 50 children filled the classroom. They sat at new desks, picked up pencils for the first time, and looked at the blackboard with a reverence normally reserved for cathedrals. Miss Patricia, standing at the front, had tears in her eyes. Good morning, children. Good morning, Miss Thornton, they responded in a clumsy chorus. Today your journey begins. Some will say you should not be here, that education is not for you. But I say knowledge is your birthright. And this room is proof that the world is changing. Eleanor watched from the window, Sebastian by her side. Servants, tenants, and even some curious aristocrats observed. When the first child wrote her name in a notebook, trembling, imperfect letters but her own, spontaneous applause erupted. The official ceremony took place in the afternoon. The local vicar blessed the building. Lady Victoria, in a surprising moment, gave a speech. My late husband believed in the traditional order. I believed in it too. But my son has taught me that true nobility does not protect privilege. It shares possibility. This school is a testament that love can transform not only individuals, but entire societies. She looked meaningfully at Eleanor. And sometimes those we least expect bring about the most necessary changes. But not everything was celebration. 3 days after the opening, someone scrawled on the outer wall during the night, "Scum deserve no education." Sebastian cleaned it himself, then planted a garden on the spot, turning vandalism into beauty. A week later, a textile factory worker whose son attended the school was fired. His employer had said, "I don't employ men who send their children to that radical school." Sebastian hired him immediately as a gardener at the manor. Threats arrived occasionally. Anonymous letters promising consequences. But Eleanor and Sebastian refused to be intimidated. Change always faces resistance, Sebastian would say. But resistance is proof that we are doing something right. In March, Eleanor woke at 3 in the morning with a sharp pain. She sat up in bed, hand on her belly, fear flooding her. "Sebastian," she shook him. "Something is wrong." He woke instantly, seeing the panic on her face. Dr. Whitmore was called urgently. He examined Eleanor with a serious expression. "Premature labor. The baby is trying to be born too early. Only 6 months. We must stop it." He ordered absolute bed rest. Eleanor could not get out of bed without assistance. She could not visit the school. She could do nothing but lie there, wait, and pray that the baby would stay inside until the proper time. Sebastian did not leave her side. He slept in an armchair next to the bed. He read to her, talked about the school, about the children's progress, about the future they would build when the crisis passed. "I'm so afraid," Eleanor cried one night. "What if we lose the baby? What if all this suffering is for nothing?" "It won't be for nothing," he held her. "Even if," his voice faltered, "even if the worst happens, the love we share does not disappear." And the school continues. 50 children already changed forever. But I want our child. I want to see him grow up, learn in that school, become a person who changes the world like his father does. And you will. You will have him. You just need to rest now, allow your body to do what it knows how to do. 3 weeks of complete rest. 3 weeks where Eleanor felt like a prisoner in her own body. Each day an eternity. But the contractions stopped. The baby stabilized. Dr. Whitmore declared with evident relief, "The danger has passed. But you still need extreme care." Eleanor cried with gratitude. And when Sebastian finally helped her walk to the window, supporting her gently, she saw the school in the distance. Children playing in the garden, Miss Patricia supervising. Life continuing, hope persisting. "We almost lost everything," she whispered. "But we didn't," Sebastian replied. "Because we fought. Because we refused to give up, as we have always done." And Eleanor, leaning on the husband she had almost lost, carrying the child who had almost not survived, watching the school that had almost never existed, understood. Sometimes almost is just a point on the path, not the final destination. May of 1840 arrived with promises finally fulfilled. Eleanor went into labor on a golden morning, as birds sang with an almost prophetic intensity. The pains began gently, waves that came and went, then gradually intensified. "Sebastian," she called, calm despite her fear. Years of caring for him during his unconsciousness had taught her that panic helped no one. He was by her side before she finished saying his name. His face was pale but determined. "I'll get Dr. Whitmore. Your mother is on her way. Everything will be fine." "Sebastian," she took his hand. "Even if it's not, I'm grateful for everything." "It will be fine," he repeated firmly, "because the universe would not be cruel enough to bring us this far only to—" A contraction interrupted him. Eleanor groaned, squeezing his hand with surprising strength. The labor lasted 14 hours. An experienced midwife brought specially from London supervised. Dr. Whitmore monitored constantly. Lady Victoria, surprisingly, remained at the door, refusing to move away. Eleanor's mother held her other hand, whispering encouragement. "You are strong, my daughter. Stronger than you imagine." Sebastian, though custom forbade men from being present during childbirth, refused to leave. "She is my wife. It is my child. I will be here. When the baby finally emerged with a furious cry at dusk, a reverent silence filled the room. "A boy," the midwife announced, cleaning him quickly. Healthy, strong, she placed him in Eleanor's arms. She looked at the tiny, red, wrinkled, absolutely perfect face. "Henry," she whispered, the name they had chosen weeks before. "Henry Sebastian Ashford." Sebastian, kneeling beside the bed, touched his son's tiny head with a trembling finger. "Hello, little one. We finally meet you." The baby reflexively grasped his father's finger. Sebastian began to cry, the tears of a man who had traversed absolute darkness and found light on the other side. "Welcome to the world, Henry. I promise you it will be a better world." 3 days after the birth, as Eleanor regained her strength, they visited the school with the baby. The children gathered around, wanting to see the Lord's baby. "Will he study here too?" a 9-year-old girl asked timidly. "Certainly," Eleanor replied. "Alongside all of you, because here everyone is equal." Miss Patricia smiled, showing the children's notebooks. The progress was visible. Letters forming words, words forming sentences, sentences forming their own thoughts. "I have 30 literate children," she reported proudly. "In 3 months, and 2 are already writing short stories. May we read them?" Sebastian asked. An 8-year-old boy, the son of a coal miner, stood up shyly. He read with a hesitant but clear voice, "Once upon a time there was a boy who worked in a dark factory. One day a good man built a school. The boy learned to read. Now the boy knows he can be more than a worker. He can be an engineer, a doctor, even a teacher. Because the school taught him, birth is not destiny." Silence filled the room. Then applause erupted. Eleanor wept. Sebastian hugged the boy, whispering, This is why we built it." June brought an unexpected surprise. A letter from Isabel. Eleanor found it on Sebastian's desk, hesitated, then opened it with his permission. "Dear Sebastian and Eleanor, I have learned of the birth of your son. Congratulations. I have also heard of the extraordinary success of the school. I write from Paris, where I have moved permanently. I have discovered, far from England and expectations, who I truly am when I am not performing the role of a perfect duchess's daughter. Here I have met a French artist. He is not an aristocrat. He has no fortune. But he looks at me the way Sebastian looked at Eleanor, not as a trophy but as a person. I understand now what I did not understand then. True love is not one that keeps us trapped in an idealized past. It is one that frees us to be authentic. Thank you, Sebastian, for refusing me. And thank you, Eleanor, for teaching me by example that courage is not being born brave. It is choosing bravery repeatedly. I wish you all happiness. And Eleanor, if you ever visit Paris, I would love to introduce you to the man who taught me that a commoner with a soul is worth more than a duke without a heart. With genuine affection, Isabel. Eleanor finished reading, handing the letter to Sebastian. He read it, a smile growing on his face. She has found peace. She has found herself, Eleanor corrected. Something the aristocracy rarely allows. In July, Lady Victoria suffered a mild heart attack. She recovered, but the event changed her. She summoned Eleanor and Sebastian to her rooms, where she was recuperating. I need to say something before it's too late. Her voice was weak but determined. Eleanor, when I brought you here, I saw you as a practical solution, a tool to save the inheritance. I did not see a person. She took Eleanor's hand. Forgive my blindness. You are more than the salvation of a title. You are the salvation of my son. You transformed him from a bored aristocrat into a man with purpose. And you transformed me from a woman trapped in traditions into someone who finally understands that love surpasses class. Eleanor kissed her mother-in-law's forehead. There is nothing to forgive. You did what was necessary. And in doing so, you gave me the greatest gift, a family. Not just a family, Lady Victoria corrected. A legacy. The school will continue for generations. Henry will grow up knowing that true nobility is service, not privilege, and all because a brave bourgeois woman refused to give up on an unconscious viscount. September 1841 brought the school's second anniversary, now with 100 children enrolled and a waiting list of 200. 3 additional teachers had been hired. During the celebration, one of the first students, a 12-year-old girl who had arrived illiterate, read an essay she had written. Before the school, I was invisible. I worked in a factory, my hands bled, no one saw me. The school taught me to read, write, and think. Now I am not invisible. I have a voice. And when I grow up, I will open my own school so that other invisible girls can learn that they matter. There wasn't a dry eye in the house. Eleanor, pregnant again, this time with a girl they would name Victoria, held Henry, now 18 months old, his first steps unsteady but determined. Sebastian was by her side, his arm around her, watching the children sing a hymn Miss Patricia had taught them. We are all equal under the sky, different only within, where the heart beats the same song. We did it, Eleanor whispered. We changed the world. A small part of it, but we changed it. No, Sebastian corrected gently. You changed the world. I just woke up and discovered that an extraordinary woman had already started the revolution. They kissed there, under the September sun, surrounded by children whose lives would never be the same, on an estate that had learned that walls do not define homes, people do. Till epilogue. 10 years later, 1850. Eleanor, now 36, sat in the garden of Ashford Manor watching 3 children play. Henry, 9, was building an elaborate architectural project with wooden blocks. He had inherited his father's talent for design, combined with his mother's pragmatism. Victoria, 7, was reading a science book far too advanced for her age. Brown hair like her mother, the determination of her grandmother, an intelligence that challenged her tutors. Edmund, 5, the youngest, was distributing imaginary flowers to the trees, explaining that everyone needs presents, even plants. Sebastian approached from behind, hugging Eleanor. Do you remember, he murmured, when I woke up and thought everything was an impossible dream? I remember when I used to visit you while you were unconscious, whispering confessions I thought would never be heard. I heard every word. He kissed the top of her head. Every promise, every fear, every declaration of love that you thought was madness. It was madness, Eleanor smiled. But the best kind. Victoria ran up to them holding her book. Mother, Father, when can I study medicine at university? Universities don't accept women, darling, Sebastian began. Yet, Eleanor interrupted, they don't accept them yet, but the world is changing. Perhaps when you grow up, or perhaps I'll change the world first, Victoria declared with absolute confidence. Like you did. She ran back to her siblings. Eleanor and Sebastian exchanged a look. Our daughter will be unstoppable, he said. Just like her mother was, he replied, pride evident in his voice. Henry approached, showing his block construction. It's a new school, bigger than the current one, with a huge library, a science lab, even dormitories for children who live far away. Sebastian knelt, examining the project seriously. It's excellent, son. When you grow up, we'll build it together. And I'll teach there, Victoria added, joining them. And I'll plant huge gardens, Edmund completed. Eleanor watched her family. Impossible, improbable, absolutely perfect in its imperfection. A memory came to her. The stormy night when Sebastian had awakened, when he had said, I recognize your voice, when everything changed. What are you thinking about? Sebastian asked, reading her expression. I'm thinking that we married without knowing each other, that we built love where there was only necessity, that we turned tragedy into triumph. She looked directly into the grey-green eyes she had loved before she had ever seen them, through words in diaries, deeds told by servants, projects of architectural kindness. And I'm thinking that if I had to choose again, I would choose every moment, every tear, every doubt, every struggle, because they led us here. Sebastian held her face in both hands. You saved me twice, Eleanor Ashford. First, when you brought me back from the coma. Second, when you taught me that waking up isn't just opening your eyes, it's learning to truly see. We saved each other, she corrected, and we continue to save each other daily, because love isn't a single rescue. It's a constant choice renewed each morning. In the distance, the school, now with 200 students, was letting children out for the day. Laughter filled the air, children carrying books, notebooks, knowledge that no one could ever steal from them. Lady Victoria, now 68, watched from the veranda with Mrs. Thornton, both unlikely friends united by mutual respect. I never imagined, Lady Victoria commented, that a bourgeois confectioner would transform not only my son, but an entire society. Eleanor didn't transform society, Mrs. Thornton replied wisely. Society was ready for change. She simply had the courage to begin it. The sunset painted Somerset in golds and pinks. Eleanor called to the children, time for dinner! And then a story before bed. Tell the one about how you met Papa, Victoria requested, as she did every night. You already know that story, Eleanor protested. But we like to hear it again, Henry insisted. Inside, in the warm drawing room, the family gathered. Eleanor sat in her favorite armchair, children at her feet, Sebastian by her side. Very well, she began, as always. Once upon a time there was a confectioner who made a terrible mistake. That wasn't her fault, Victoria interrupted, knowing the story by heart. And a viscount who fell into a deep sleep and woke up with a wife he didn't know, Henry continued, but loved even before he knew her. Edmund finished, always enchanted by the paradox. Eleanor smiled, looking at Sebastian. He took her hand, lacing their fingers as they had done for 10 years, as they would for the rest of their lives. Yes, she agreed softly. They loved each other before they met. Because sometimes true love isn't about finding the perfect person. It's about choosing an imperfect one and building perfection together day by day, choice by choice. And did they live happily ever after? Edmund asked, yawning. Eleanor and Sebastian exchanged a look, an understanding that needed no words. They lived, Sebastian answered, his voice full of an emotion that 10 years had not diminished, happily in the ever-imperfect, beautiful, challenging, and absolutely real, which is the only kind of forever that truly matters. The children applauded, satisfied, and Eleanor, observing the family that almost hadn't existed, in the home she had almost lost, beside the man who had almost died, understood the final truth. Sometimes the most beautiful endings are born from the most unlikely beginnings. Sometimes the strongest love grows from the stoniest soil. And sometimes waking up is just the beginning of the true story, the one we write consciously, bravely together. Outside, the stars began to appear. The same constellations Sebastian had shown Eleanor years before, teaching her that light persists, even after its source has died. And inside, the family remained together, surrounded by warmth, love, and the promise of tomorrows they would build side by side. Because some fairy tales don't start with once upon a time. They start with I chose you, and continue with I choose you again. And they end, if they ever end, with I will always choose you. And that, Eleanor and Sebastian discovered, was the most powerful kind of magic of all.